Thank you for tuning into our podcast, Canal Days, What Life Was Like in the Industrial Connecticut River Valley of Massachusetts. I am your host, Carrie, and joining us today is Holyoke's very own local historian and creator of the historical tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Camus. He personally offers and leads public and private tours, as well as presentations of historical sites within communities throughout the state of Massachusetts. Currently, the communities he has chosen to focus on this year are Holyoke, Chicopee, South Hadley, and East Hampton, and also Granby and Amherst as well. His tours spotlight on the local canals, reservoirs, cemeteries, and churches, as well as various parks, streets, and selected historical houses within each community. And in today's episode, we will be discussing the St. Mary's School and Church located in Westfield, Massachusetts. So tell us about the arrangement of St. Mary's Church campus.
Okay, that's a beautiful arrangement. Everything's packed together on Bartlett Street in Westfield. And so you can look at the grand church, and then across the street is the grammar school of that church. And then right alongside that school is the high school, which used to be Westfield Vocational High School, but it was changed into St. Mary's High School. And then back across the street next to the church itself, there's the rectory. And in between the rectory, the churchyard has a special building housing the historic bell that used to be in the steeple. And that bell was a great donation from a married couple a long time ago. And also in that churchyard, they have memorial pavestones and other memorials. And then down the street, they have a Father Matthew Temperance Society building, which the parishioners used greatly 100 years ago. And now behind the church, there's the convent. And it's a big convent because it had a big K through 12 school system going. So the convent had to be very large. And it's beautifully made. I love the architecture of that the best. And so the arrangement is quite beautiful. Its cemetery is about 1.5 miles away towards the northeast. And it's also called the St. Mary's Cemetery, named after the school and church. And today we're going to talk about the history of the church and schools, and the history of the, and then what the modern campus is like. And hopefully we can have a tour happen in Westfield at both the cemetery and on the church campus in the near future.
And what is the history of the church?
All right, now, the St. Mary's Church was first made in December of 1854 at the present location. It was a wooden church. It was burned in the fire in 1881, sadly. December of 1854, remember how old that is. That is almost as old as the other churches around the area. So it was one of the top 10 oldest Catholic churches in western Massachusetts. Now a new church was made, the one that's there now. It was finished in 1885 as a neo-Gothic church. It's a beautiful church and fairly well maintained. And you get to see it in all its glory. Now, the history of the church includes the history of as many aspects around it. For instance, St. Mary Convent was made in 1909, and that's behind the church. And then the school, the grammar school, which is kindergarten to 8th grade, was made in 1898 across the street. What was now called the parish hall, but what was the rectory, was made in 1894. And that had a predecessor too. That's not the original. So there was an older rectory nearby, but that is gone. And then also a little beyond the present school, there's the St. Mary's High School. All right, now this has a building. This was made in 1922. This was the former Westfield Trade School, and it was purchased by the St. Mary's Parish to be its high school in the year 1963. And it still exists as such. Now, in recent history, less than 20 years ago, they added a preschool. They have two preschool buildings, which used to be residential locations, and those are very basically right across the street from the rectory itself. Now, a lot of pastors through the years, so the great history of this St. Mary's is very, very long. Some of them are buried in the St. Mary's Cemetery. Most are not, though. And thus, one priest, I think his name was Michael Xavier Carroll, is the founder. I still don't know he's buried. But one important priest along the way is James Donahue. He's the one that got the school system going. He served the campus for 17 years from 1891 to 1908. He got the grammar school going, and that's very important because then you have the expansion of into the convent, you get a bigger rectory, so forth and so on. Also nearby is the Father Matthew Total Abstinence Mutual Benevolent Society, and that was made in 1892 during the height of the temperance movement. So there's a lot to this campus. I've known the campus for about 40 years, and I've visited it quite a bit just to see what it's like, and I'm always impressed by its nice appearance. Everything's symmetric, and everything's nicely arranged.
And real quick, before we continue with the rest of our interview, just to fill our listeners in, if you want to find out more information or sign up for any of his various tours, you can check out his website at holyokecanaltour.org. And there you can also find videos and podcasts of the stops on each of his tours, as well as photos and text of the historical sites throughout as well. And for private tours and other inquiries, you can email him directly at bobcat4214, capital B, at yahoo.com. And his tours make for fun, educational outdoor activities for families and group parties. So getting back to our interview, what is the history of the school?
Okay, now the school gets a separate history from the church. I mentioned some of its history, but if you look at the school carefully, it's got a line above its second floor windows. And yes, it's a three-story schoolhouse. So, when it was first made in 1898, it was only 2 floors high, and it had 1st to 8th grade. But along the way, I think it was 1920s or so, or 19 teens, they added a high school. And to add a high school, you had to add a floor to the school. And that's why there's a line in the brick. You could see where a floor was added. The top floor became the high school. The bottom 2 floors were the grammar schools. And it stayed that way for a long time until in the 1960s they finally bought out the Westfield Trade School, and the high school moved into that campus. By then they were needing chemistry labs and other kind of equipment, and so it needed to have a bigger space, which is great because most Catholic schools were contracting by the year 1960, whereas St. Mary's was expanded. And the reason why is because Westfield, although it's a city, has a suburban feel to most of it, and people were moving out of the big cities like Springfield, Holyoke, and Chicopee, and to the smaller towns and cities. And so St. Mary's had a benefit. Its high school grew larger, and its grammar school grew larger, when others in the cities were getting smaller.
And what is the modern parish and school like?
All right, now they were almost closed, and what happened was that the bishop of the Springfield Diocese wanted to have only one Catholic high school in western Massachusetts. And there were, at that point, maybe 3. St. Joseph's Pittsfield closed, about 15 years ago or so. The bishop wanted St. Mary's closed so that all the students would be in one place. That would be at the new school, the Pope Francis High School in Springfield. But the St. Mary's people wanted a high school there and a grammar school. And so they pushed very hard to keep their school system going. They did not want to join in with the new high school being made. And the push was so hard about 10 years ago that they succeeded. What did happen, though, is they lost overall control of the school system. So instead of being what's called a parish school and high school, they had to become a diocesan school and high school. That means the ultimate control then goes to the bishop, but at least they survived as an institution. They're now run by a board, but the ultimate control is under the bishop now instead of under the parish itself. They were the last parish high school left in Western Massachusetts when it used to be a lot more about 80 years ago. So that's great, and they love being independent. The level of the curriculum is very high. The amount of students is also high enough to be supported, which is great to see, and it's great to see this independence out of a unit.
And thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours and historical topics of your expertise. And we want to thank our listeners for tuning in. And be sure to check out his more podcasts and videos on his website as well as on SoundCloud.com. And there's new videos and podcasts posted daily. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for tuning into our podcast, Canal Days, What Life is Like in the Industrial Connecticut River Valley of Massachusetts. I am your host, Carrie, and joining us today is Holyoke's very own local historian and creator of the historical tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Como. He offers both public and private tours, as well as presentations of historical sites within the communities throughout the state of Massachusetts. Currently, the communities that he has chosen to focus on this year are Holyoke, Chicopee, South Hadley, and East Hampton, and also Granby and Amherst as well. His tours spotlight on the local canals, reservoirs, cemeteries, and churches, as well as various parks, streets, and selected historical houses within each community. In today's episode, we'll be discussing the St. Mary's Cemetery located in Westfield, Massachusetts. So in general, what is a St. Mary's Cemetery like?
Alright, St. Mary's Cemetery belongs to the St. Mary's Church campus, and we're going to talk about today the old section of the cemetery, because that's very important, and where the priests are, what the chapel might be looking like, and what's going to happen to this wonderful cemetery. It's on Route 202 out to the northwest or northeast of Westfield Center itself, and it's always been associated with the St. Mary's campus. And the cemetery started up in the 1860s, and it's a very simple lawn-style outlook to it. The landscape is well taken care of. It has a beautiful chapel towards the back, and the poor person section where other things are is towards the left side of that chapel. So if you ever go visit there, concentrate on that. And then some of the bigger family stones are towards the middle front, and then the priest section is more towards the right-hand side as you go into the cemetery itself. Now, the cemetery also is not only for the St. Mary's Church, it's also for the St. Joachim Church in Westfield. And so it has a lot of burials within it. Its website, I think, that says it's 23,000. I bet you there's a lot more than that. And so it's an enormous cemetery, and they own a lot of land around it. So it's going to be even greater 100 years from now. Now, one thing that mars it a tiny bit is that the Massachusetts Turnpike is quite visible towards its southern end of the cemetery, and you can hear it. It's not terribly loud, but you can still hear it as you go around.
And describe the old section of the cemetery.
Okay, the old section of the cemetery, I'm going to say there's three parts to it. This is to the immediate left of the chapel as you look inwards to the chapel. And the three parts are described. The very back part is the baby section. These are non-baptized babies that are buried back here. You cannot have a child buried in the concentrated or holy part of a Catholic cemetery. They have to be buried towards the back where it wasn't made holy. And that's what the back third of that old part is. And then as you move to the middle third, you start to meet burials that are a potter's field. These are pauper graves, or people that the family could not afford to bury them, and so they were buried by fraternal groups of the church, and then most of the time they could not afford stones, so there's not many stones back there in that part, and neither in the baby section. And then in the front third of this older left side, you have a lot of single individual burials where the family could not afford a big gravestone, a big family plot, and they're usually very old burials in that section. That's the front side of that left part. And as you walk through, you can distinguish between these sections very easily because you can look at the year of birth and death. For instance, for the babies, for the potter's field, you're not going to see many gravestones at all. And then towards the front, you can see that most of the people there died a long time ago in the 1880s, 1890s, so forth. So it's quite a distinctive place around there. Now, it doesn't mean all the old burials there. The old burials, which the family could afford deeds on a larger plot and a larger stone, are buried right in front of that, but towards the front of the cemetery near the front fence and front gates. So look around that section too to get a real flavor of what this cemetery is like.
At HolyokeCanalTour.org. And there you can find videos and podcasts of the stop signage tour, as well as photos and text of the historical sites throughout as well. And for his private tours and other inquiries, you could email him directly at bobcat4214B@yahoo.com. And his tours make for fun, educational, outdoor activities for families and group parties. So getting back to our interview, what priests are buried here?
Okay, in this section, the priest section, there's 3 special priests, and I'll describe who they are. Okay, so the 3 priests that are buried in this priest circle are the following. Patrick Dodd is there. He was the pastor of the St. Mary's Church from 1946 to 1951. And thus, he's very integral in getting the parish through tough times after World War II. And then there's Vincent Poidoukas, and he was the pastor of St. Casimir's Church, 1934 to 1977. That's 43 years. That's an incredible record for a Catholic pastor. And St. Casimir's is, of course, the Polish church. And then there's George Fitzgerald, and he was a priest at St. Mary's. I think he was mostly a priest during the 19-teens, 1920 at St. Mary's. So this is a very important place, and it's good to go see this location because it's very well kept and very large. It's, if you're facing towards the chapel area, it's towards the right, pretty far over, maybe one street inwards and 1 street over.
And tell us what future the cemetery has.
Okay, there's still a lot of land to grow here. All the land in back is still owned by the cemetery. They'll just have to cut down some of the trees. In fact, right behind the chapel, there's a large grove of trees, and that could be also nurtured. There's actually work paths through there. They probably go in there to take care of things. So all that land is still can be kept up. Now, in terms of maintenance, pretty nice. I hope that at some point they'd make one special section within the cemetery that's very nice, like a crucifix or a statue that's gorgeous somewhere. And I wish they'd fix up the front gate a tiny bit. The wrought iron fence is nice, but if they get a nicer gate entrance, that would be wonderful to have.
And thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours and historical topics of your expertise. And of course, we'd like to thank our listeners for tuning in. And of course, if you want to check out a large selection of our other podcasts on his website, also you can check them out on SoundCloud.com. And be sure to stay up to date with new podcasts and videos posted daily. Thank you, and hope you join us again.